China is currently conducting one of the most dangerous biological experiments in modern history, right on the edge of the Kubuqi Desert. They are systematically breeding over 1 million Rex rabbits in a zone that is already critically unstable. To any agricultural engineer or historian, this looks like madness. We all know the story of Australia in 1859. 24 rabbits were released for hunting, and within decades, they exploded into a population of billions, stripping the continent bare and accelerating desertification on a massive scale. Rabbits are historically defined as the apex predator of vegetation. Bringing them into the Gobi, a geological monster that is already devouring 3,600 square kilometers of land every year, sounds like an act of ecological suicide. It is like pouring gasoline on a forest fire. But the satellite imagery from Inner Mongolia tells a completely different story. Instead of a barren wasteland, we are seeing expanding green zones. This army of rabbits hasn't destroyed the desert. They have conquered it. They generated a massive 5 billion yuan industry and, more importantly, produced the one thing that billion-dollar excavation machines could not: a unique organic binder capable of cementing loose sand into fertile soil. So, we are left with a massive engineering contradiction. How does the exact same biological organism act as a plague in Australia but a savior in China? If you are ready to see how China turned a biological threat into an industrial asset, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. To understand why the rabbit solution is considered an engineering breakthrough, we must first analyze the physical reality of the Kubuqi Desert. When we look at this landscape, we do not see soil in the agricultural sense. What we are looking at is billions of tons of crushed silica dioxide. From a structural engineering perspective, this sand is an inert substrate. It has no structure, no cohesion, and most critically, it possesses almost zero cation exchange capacity. In simple terms, the sand grains are electrically neutral. They have no magnetic ability to hold onto water molecules or nutrient ions. This creates a hydrodynamic nightmare for anyone trying to plant a tree. For decades, engineers tried to brute force this problem using modern chemistry. They trucked in massive amounts of industrial NPK fertilizers, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, hoping to jumpstart vegetation. But they were fighting physics. Because the sand cannot bind with the chemicals, gravity wins every time. When water is applied, it doesn't soak in. It falls straight through the gaps between the silica grains, dragging the expensive fertilizers down into the deep groundwater where roots cannot reach. It is the agricultural equivalent of trying to fill a bathtub that has no bottom. You can pour millions of dollars worth of water and chemicals onto the surface, but within hours, the sun evaporates the top layer, and the gravity drains the bottom layer. The result is a bone-dry kill zone that starves any seedling attempting to take root. The obvious solution would be to import organic topsoil to create a planting layer. But this brings us to the logistical trap. To cover just one single acre of desert with a standard 6-inch layer of topsoil, you need to move approximately 1,000 tons of earth. Now, multiply that by the thousands of square kilometers of the Gobi. The fuel costs alone to transport that much mass would exceed the entire budget of the project. It is fiscally impossible. The engineers realized they were facing a strange resource paradox. On one hand, they had infinite sand. On the other hand, they had access to massive amounts of cheap agricultural waste, dry straw, corn stalks, and dead grass. But these materials were too dry and tough to mix into the sand effectively. They wouldn't break down naturally in the arid climate. They would just sit there and rot. They needed a bridge. They needed a way to rapidly convert this dry, hard cellulose into a moist, sticky, nutrient-rich glue that could bind the sand grains together. And they needed this conversion to happen on-site at an industrial speed without using a single drop of diesel fuel. So, the engineers had a massive supply of sand and a massive supply of dry agricultural waste like corn stalks. They needed a machine to process this waste into fertilizer. But why did they choose the Rex rabbit? Why not cows, pigs, or sheep? This wasn't a random choice. It was a calculated decision based on two engineering metrics: conversion efficiency and chemical stability. First, let's look at the input mechanism. The Rex rabbit is essentially a biological grinding machine designed for high cellulose fibers. In the harsh environment of Inner Mongolia, you have an abundance of rough, dry forage, corn stalks, licorice stems, and tough desert grasses. A pig cannot digest this efficiently. A cow takes too long and requires massive water intake. The rabbit, however, has a specialized digestive system that rapidly breaks down these hard fibers, extracting nutrients and expelling the rest as highly compressed organic pellets. But the real secret, the reason this project works where others failed, lies in the output. It is a concept known in agronomy as cold manure. To understand this, we have to look at the chemistry of traditional livestock waste. If you have ever worked on a farm or even in a home garden, you know that you cannot take fresh manure from a cow, horse, or pig and put it directly onto a plant. We call that hot manure. Why is it hot? Because it is unstable. It is rich in raw ammonia and is still undergoing active decomposition. If you put fresh cow manure on a seedling, the bacterial fermentation generates intense physical heat and releases chemical compounds that will literally burn the root system of the plant. To use it, you have to compost it, pile it up, and wait 3 to 6 months for it to cool down or stabilize. Here is a quick question for the gardeners watching. Have you ever accidentally killed a plant by over-fertilizing or using fresh manure? If you have, you know exactly what root burn looks like. Let me know in the comments below. In the desert, time is a luxury they don't have. They cannot wait 6 months for compost piles to rot while the sand dunes are moving. This is where the rabbit changes the game. Rabbit manure is chemically unique. It is one of the few animal wastes that is considered cold. It is packed with nitrogen and phosphorus, higher concentrations than chicken or cow manure, but the nitrogen is in a stable form. It does not ferment aggressively. This means the engineers can take the waste straight from the rabbit cage and apply it directly to the delicate roots of a desert sapling on the same day. No composting, no waiting, no root burn. It is an instant access nitrogen injection system. Now, let's look at how they scaled this into an industrial workflow. They didn't just release rabbits to run wild. They built massive industrial breeding centers, rows of standardized hutches housing thousands of rabbits. The floors are designed with automatic collection systems. Every day, tons of this cold manure, mixed with the rabbit's urine, is collected. This mixture is the magic bullet. The urine provides moisture and urea, while the solid pellets provide organic matter. They take this mixture and blend it directly with the silica sand. Remember the problem in part 2? The sand couldn't hold water, but when you mix rabbit manure into it, the organic matter acts as a sponge. It creates what soil scientists call an artificial soil crust. This crust binds the loose sand particles together, preventing them from blowing away in the wind, and it holds onto the water long enough for roots to drink. Once this artificial crust is laid down, they plant the crops. But they don't plant just anything. They plant licorice, Glycyrrhiza glabra, or alfalfa. Why licorice? Because it is a legume. Its roots have nodules that fix more nitrogen from the air into the soil. It is a drought-resistant survivor. And here is the beauty of the closed loop. 1. The licorice grows, anchoring the sand dunes with its deep roots. 2. The stems and leaves of the licorice are harvested and fed back to the rabbits. 3. The rabbits eat the licorice, grow fat, and produce more cold manure. 4. The manure goes back to the sand to grow more licorice. It is a self-sustaining biological engine. The only thing humans need to add is the initial setup. Instead of fighting the desert with trucks and chemicals, they built a system where the animals and plants work together to manufacture soil. But a system is only good if it makes money. If this was just a science experiment, it would have run out of funding years ago. In the next section, we are going to look at the hard numbers, the ROI. How do 1 million rabbits generate 5 billion yuan? Let's crunch the data. Most environmental restoration projects fail for one simple reason. They burn cash. They rely entirely on government subsidies, and when the grant money runs out, the project dies. The Kubuqi model is different. It was designed from day one to be a profitable commercial enterprise. To prove this, let's look at the hard numbers generated by this rabbit empire. First, let's run the math on the fertilizer output. An adult Rex rabbit produces approximately 150 grams of manure per day. On a small scale, that is negligible. But when you scale this up to an inventory of 1 million rabbits, the physics changes. We are talking about 150 metric tons of premium organic nitrate being generated every single day. To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of 10 fully loaded dump trucks of fertilizer appearing out of thin air every 24 hours for free. If the operators had to purchase this amount of industrial NPK fertilizer and truck it into the middle of the desert, the logistics alone would cost millions annually. Here, the factory, the rabbit, produces the fuel right where it is needed. This leads us to the double revenue stream model. Most agricultural operations have a linear income. You plant corn, you sell corn. This project runs a parallel economy that compounds value. Revenue stream 1, the meat and fur market. We cannot ignore the demographic reality. China is the world's largest consumer of rabbit meat, with Sichuan province alone consuming nearly 300 million rabbit heads per year. The demand is insatiable. Additionally, the Rex rabbit is bred specifically for its dense, velvet-like fur. A high-quality pelt can fetch upwards of 30 to 50 renminbi, which is roughly $4 to $7 in the textile market. So, the machines that are fertilizing the desert are also walking capital assets that are liquidated for a profit at the end of their life cycle. Revenue stream 2, pharmaceutical sand. Remember, they aren't planting cheap grass. They are planting licorice. In the global market, licorice root is a critical ingredient for traditional Chinese medicine and cosmetics, trading at prices 5 to 10 times higher than wheat or corn. The rabbits provide the free fertilizer to grow the high-value medicine. The medicine provides the free fodder to feed the rabbits. It is a closed economic loop where the operational cost of feeding the system approaches zero. Let's look at the cost-efficiency delta. Data from the Elian Resources Group, the primary firm behind this initiative, indicates a massive drop in reclamation costs. Using traditional methods, trucking in soil and chemical agents costs approximately 22,500 renminbi, or about $3,100 per hectare. By switching to the biological rabbit manure method, that cost plummets to roughly 9,000 renminbi, which is just $1,200 per hectare. That is a 60% reduction in capital expenditure. When you are trying to reclaim 10,000 square kilometers, that saving isn't just a margin. It's the difference between bankruptcy and an empire. But the most shocking statistic, the number that truly silenced the engineering critics, is the survival rate. In previous decades, planting trees in the Gobi using raw water was a gamble. The sapling survival rate hovered around a dismal 20%. That means for every $100 spent planting trees, $80 was wasted as the trees died of dehydration within months. With the introduction of the rabbit manure binder creating that artificial soil crust, the survival rate skyrocketed to 85%. Think about that efficiency jump. They quadrupled the success rate while cutting the cost by more than half. This stability allows the vegetation to finally outpace the movement of the sand dunes, locking the desert in place. This data proves that the rabbit isn't just a biological tool. It is an economic multiplier. But as with any high-density biological system, there is a catch. When you pack millions of animals into a concentrated area, you are walking a fine line between efficiency and disaster. In the next section, we are going to look at the geopolitical comparison, why China succeeded with this risky method while Australia is still fighting a losing war against the same animal, and the dark risks that come with industrializing a species known for being uncontrollable. This brings us to a humiliating geopolitical contrast. While China is turning rabbits into a billion-dollar asset, Australia is still fighting a 100-year war against them. The Australian government has spent millions of dollars building the famous rabbit-proof fence, the longest fence in the world, and releasing deadly viruses like myxomatosis to wipe the species out. Why is the outcome so different? The answer lies in a single engineering concept: containment versus chaos. Australia suffers from a free-range plague. The rabbits there are wild, reproducing unchecked across the landscape. China, however, treats the rabbit not as an animal, but as a biological component in a machine. They are strictly confined in industrial hutches. They never touch the open ground until their waste does. This proves that the rabbit itself isn't the problem. The management system is the problem. However, operating a biological machine of this scale comes with massive. First, there is the biological risk. When you pack 1 million animals into high-density cages, you are creating the perfect laboratory for disease. If a viral pathogen enters one of these facilities, it doesn't just kill a few animals. It can wipe out the entire inventory in days. To prevent this, these farms often rely on heavy antibiotic use, which raises serious concerns about creating drug-resistant superbugs that could eventually jump to humans. Then, there is the ethical dilemma. While the project is an ecological miracle, it is built on the fur trade. In a world that is increasingly moving away from animal fur due to ethical concerns, this business model faces a long-term threat. If the global market bans rabbit fur, the primary revenue stream collapses, and the money to fight the desert evaporates. Finally, we have to talk about the pollution paradox. The smell near these megafarms can be overpowering. While the manure is gold for the sand, if the collection systems fail or if there is a delay in processing, the concentration of ammonia can turn from a fertilizer into a local pollutant, contaminating the air and the water table. It is a fragile balance. One slip up, and the solution becomes the pollution. The ultimate lesson from the Kubuqi Desert is simple but profound. There is no such thing as an absolute pest. In nature, nothing is trash. A rabbit is only a destroyer if you let it run wild. If you place it correctly in a supply chain, it becomes a builder. China didn't invent a new technology. They simply looked at a creature that everyone else hated and asked, how can we use this? As deserts continue to expand across Africa and the Middle East, this integrated livestock restoration model offers a blueprint that goes beyond planting trees. It suggests that the future of survival isn't just about high-tech machines, but about harnessing the biological engines we already have. So, here is the question I want you to debate in the comments. Looking at the success in the Gobi, do you think Australia should stop trying to kill their rabbits and start farming them to save the outback? Or is the risk of them escaping and destroying the ecosystem simply too high? I really want to read your perspective on this. If you learned something new about the weird world of extreme agriculture today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We will see you in the next deep dive. Thanks for watching.